Isla Monroe stepped out of the black car in a flowing white dress that danced with the breeze. Her heels clicked softly on the stone pavement as she walked toward the tall iron gates of the mansion she had just bought. The house sat on a quiet hill overlooking the small town of Fairhill, a place where nothing ever really happened. But from the moment Isla arrived, everything began to change. No one knew where she came from. The realtor mentioned Europe. The banker said California. The old lady next door was sure she was a widow. But the only truth was that Isla didn't speak much about her past. She smiled politely, nodded at the right times, and left behind a trail of perfume that lingered like a question mark. Fairhill was used to quiet beauty, well-mannered families, and Sunday brunches. But Isla was different. Her eyes were the color of storm clouds, her voice smooth and low like a secret, and her presence made men forget how to speak. The women in town whispered about her at grocery stores and salons. The men couldn't stop watching her. One of the first to notice her was Nathan Cole, the town's young and kind-hearted doctor. He saw her one morning standing outside the bakery, waiting for her coffee. She had no makeup, no jewelry, and yet she looked like she had stepped out of a dream. Nathan offered a gentle smile and a warm hello. She gave him a nod, took her coffee, and walked away, but something in that moment made Nathan feel like he'd just met someone who would matter. Julian West was next. Wealthy, bold, and confident, he owned most of the town's real estate and wasn't used to hearing the word no. When he heard about the mysterious woman who bought the old Greystone house, he sent her a bottle of wine and an invitation to dinner. She arrived wearing black and diamonds, said little, and listened a lot. Julian was used to being the center of attention, but that night he found himself trying hard to impress her, and failing. He was fascinated. Then there was Elijah. He didn't speak to her for weeks. He only watched from a distance. He was tall, quiet, and always alone. People said he had once been a cop in a big city but left after something went wrong. He lived on the edge of town and rarely talked to anyone unless he had to. But he noticed Isla. The way she moved, the way she watched people, the way she avoided certain questions. Something about her felt familiar to him, not in memory but in instinct. Each man saw her differently. Nathan saw beauty and kindness. Julian saw a challenge and something to possess. Elijah saw danger, wrapped in silk. It wasn't long before Isla became the center of attention in Fairhill. She was invited to every event, every dinner, every charity ball. She accepted only a few. When she did appear, she wore elegant gowns, spoke softly, and left early. The more distant she remained, the more people wanted to be close to her. Nathan began bringing flowers to her door. White lilies, always fresh. He invited her to walks in the park and dinners at small restaurants. She agreed sometimes and smiled gently when he spoke of his love for books, for medicine, for quiet things. Julian, on the other hand, took a bolder approach. He sent her dresses, jewelry, even a car once, though she returned it without a note. He talked of vacations, of yachts, of private islands. She listened, nodded, and never gave an answer. Elijah never sent anything. He watched from his porch or across the street. He was the only one who never tried to win her. But Isla didn't ignore Elijah. Once she walked across the street and handed him a book. No title, just a leather cover. "You might like this," she said. Elijah took it, nodded, and watched her walk away. Inside the book was a pressed violet and a line written in fine handwriting. Sometimes silence is louder than a scream. After that, Elijah started keeping notes. Not because he was falling for her, but because something didn't feel right. He noticed how she never seemed surprised, how she always knew what others were thinking before they said it. He remembered stories from his old life, cases where charm was a weapon, beauty a mask. But he also felt something else, something he didn't want to name. Nathan, on the other hand, was in deep. He had never loved anyone like this before. He believed Isla was lonely, wounded, and misunderstood. He told her one evening that he wanted to be the one who healed her. Isla smiled, touched his hand, and whispered, "Be careful with broken things. They cut deeper than they look. Julian became frustrated. He wasn't used to waiting. He began to push harder, showing up uninvited, making grand gestures. One night, he rented the entire rooftop of the Fairhill Hotel and filled it with candles and roses. Isla arrived, looked around, and said, "This is beautiful. But it's not love. It's control." She left before the wine was poured. Despite the rejection, Julian didn't back down. He saw Isla as a prize, something he deserved. He began to ask questions about her past, hire people to look into her background. What he found only deepened the mystery. No social media. No clear history before 2 years ago. Just a few scattered records, some under different names. Nathan noticed the change in Julian and began to worry. He tried to warn Isla, but she only said, "Everyone wants something." "What do you want, Nathan?" He replied, "Just you." She didn't answer. Elijah, meanwhile, started to piece things together. He noticed Isla's patterns, how she never stayed long at events, how she always walked alone, how her stories changed slightly every time she told them. He remembered a case from years ago, a woman in another city who left behind a trail of broken men, one dead, two institutionalized. He dug deeper. Then came the night of the fireflies. There was a town gathering by the lake. Soft music, paper lanterns, laughter. Isla arrived in a pale blue dress. Nathan offered her a drink. Julian hovered nearby, eyes cold. Elijah watched from the edge of the crowd. As the sky darkened and the fireflies began to glow, the tension grew. Julian tried to pull Isla aside. She refused. Nathan stepped between them. Words were exchanged. Isla simply walked away and disappeared into the trees. Later that night, Julian was seen driving away fast, face pale, jaw clenched. Nathan walked home alone, quiet and heartbroken. Elijah stayed behind, watching the woods. The next morning, the whole town was talking. Someone had spray-painted the word, "She is not what she seems," on Julian's office door. No one saw who did it. Isla didn't leave her house all day. Nathan sat outside her gate with a book in his hand, waiting. Inside her mansion, Isla stood at her window, watching the town turn its head toward her. She touched the glass, her face calm, unreadable. In the mirror behind her, a photograph of 3 men lay on a silver tray. One was circled in red, one in blue. The third had no mark. She closed the curtains. The game had begun. Isla Monroe never made promises. She smiled, she listened, and she vanished before anything could be defined. To each of the 3 men drawn to her, she was something different. To Nathan, she was soft and thoughtful, someone who brought peace to his quiet evenings and made the world seem gentler. To Julian, she was fire, unpredictable, passionate, a woman he wanted to own more than love. To Elijah, she was a riddle, dangerous and beautiful, pulling him back into instincts he thought he had buried. She saw each of them, but never at once. With Nathan, she spent quiet afternoons walking along the river, sometimes speaking, sometimes just listening to the water move. He brought her books, poems he had written long ago and forgotten. She would smile at the pages, trace the lines with her fingers, but never read them aloud. Julian, on the other hand, met her in places full of light and sound. Rooftop bars, art shows, parties where everyone knew his name. She stood beside him in sleek black dresses, her hand resting lightly on his arm. He introduced her to people as someone important, though he didn't know exactly who she was to him. Every time he tried to pull her closer, she stepped back just enough to make him chase again. Elijah watched it all from the shadows. He saw the patterns forming, the tension building, and still, he said nothing. Once, he passed her on the street. She looked at him and smiled, but there was something in her eyes that made him stop in his tracks. It wasn't affection. It wasn't fear. It was recognition. Like she knew exactly who he was and what he was thinking. Town began to notice. The women spoke in whispers, the men watched with thin smiles. Isla became the subject of every conversation. No one could agree on who she really was, but everyone agreed on one thing. She had a power over people that was both fascinating and frightening. Then the strange things began. One morning, Nathan walked out to his car and found one of his tires slashed. He stared at it for a long time before calling anyone. Later that day, Julian discovered a dead cat placed on his porch. Not just lying there, but arranged like it had been posed. His hands shook as he picked it up and threw it away. Elijah felt someone following him late at night. The footsteps would stop when he turned around. The shadows seemed thicker near his home. None of the incidents were connected, at least not in any official way. Police came and went, wrote down notes, shrugged, and left. But the three men began to turn on each other. Nathan started to question Julian's intentions. He knew Julian had money and power, and he believed that made him dangerous. He worried that Julian saw Isla as something to collect. Julian, meanwhile, thought Nathan was weak, too soft to protect someone like her. He told people Nathan wasn't man enough for Isla, that she needed someone strong and bold. Elijah said nothing. He watched them both and said nothing at all. At a dinner party one night, Nathan and Julian found themselves seated across from each other. Isla arrived late, wearing red. She sat between them, smiling as though she didn't notice the tension. Nathan tried to speak gently, asking her if she felt safe in town, if anything had worried her lately. Julian interrupted with jokes and loud stories, trying to keep the focus on himself. Isla didn't respond to her. She listened, her eyes moving between them, and when the dinner ended, she left alone, stepping into a cab without a word. Nathan followed her once. He told himself it wasn't because he didn't trust her, it was because he didn't trust the others. He saw her walk into a bookstore, speak to the old man behind the counter, then disappear through a back door. He waited outside for an hour. She never came out. When he returned the next morning, the man said she had left through the alley. Nathan didn't believe him. Julian hired someone. Private investigator. He wanted to know where Isla went, who she spoke to, what secret she was hiding. The man followed her for 3 days and then quit. He told Julian he didn't want the job anymore. Said she looked at him once through a cafe window and he felt like she saw everything. Every mistake, every lie. Julian paid him double and told him to keep quiet. Elijah didn't follow her, didn't hire anyone. But he remembered. He wrote down times, places, expressions. He watched how Isla moved through the town like she belonged and didn't belong all at once. He started to wonder if maybe she wasn't the danger. Maybe she was the test. One night, he found a note on his doorstep. No name, no handwriting he recognized. Just one sentence. You're the only one who sees. He burned it without thinking. Jealousy began to take root like poison. Nathan stopped answering Julian's calls. Julian stopped pretending to like Nathan. They both tried to outdo each other, gifts, gestures, words. And still Isla gave them nothing clear. Just half smiles, fleeting touches, quiet exits. One evening, Nathan arrived at Isla's house with a bouquet of wildflowers. She let him in, made him tea, sat beside him on the couch. He told her he couldn't stop thinking about her. That he felt like he had known her in another life. Isla looked at him for a long time before answering. Maybe you did, she said. Maybe we all did. Then she stood up and walked him to the door. The next night, Julian took her to a gala. She wore a green gown that shimmered under the lights. He introduced her to mayors, artists, and foreign investors. She danced with him once, and then disappeared to the balcony. He found her there later, staring at the city lights. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How everything bright eventually burns out," she said. They didn't speak for the rest of the night. Elijah's nights were sleepless. He sat by his window, gun on the table, cigarette in hand. He told himself he was just being careful, just making sure nothing happened. But in truth, he was waiting for what he didn't know. He started receiving emails from an unknown address. No words, just photos. One of Isla walking with Nathan. Another of her at Julian's side. One of her staring into a mirror. He traced the source. Led nowhere. He deleted them, but they kept coming. One photo stopped him cold. It was of him, standing at his window, cigarette in hand. Taken from the street. He checked the cameras. They had been disabled. That was when he knew. This wasn't just a love story gone wrong. This was something else. Something older. Something waiting. In the center of it all was Isla. Not running. Not chasing. Just watching. One day, Nathan confronted Julian outside the coffee shop. Their voices rose, hands pointed. People stared. Julian laughed, called Nathan a fool. Nathan called Julian a predator. Isla walked by just as it happened. She didn't stop. She didn't even look at them. She stepped into the shop, ordered her drink, and left. That night, Julian dreamed of fire. Nathan dreamed of drowning. Elijah didn't sleep at all. Fairhill, once quiet and simple, now felt heavy with secrets. Kind no one spoke of out loud. Kind that changed people. The dangerous game had begun, and none of them knew the rules. Only Isla did. And she never played to lose. Rain fell gently on the cobbled streets of Fairhill, soft and steady, the kind that made everything feel quieter. Inside the warm glow of Nathan's small living room, Isla sat curled on the couch with her legs tucked beneath her. She wore a loose gray sweater, no makeup, her hair slightly damp from the walkover. Nathan sat across from her, trying not to stare too much, but failing. He had never seen her like this, relaxed, real, and maybe even a little sad. She had come to him without calling. Just knocked on his door and said, "Can I stay for a while?" He nodded and stepped aside. Now they sat in silence, the kind that felt full, not empty. Nathan poured tea and handed her a mug, his fingers brushing against hers. She didn't pull away. Through a while she spoke. "I miss quiet people," she said softly. "The kind who don't try to fill every silence. The kind who don't look at me like I'm a puzzle." Nathan smiled. "Then you came to the right place." She looked at him then, really looked, and for the first time something shifted between them. She leaned her head back and closed her eyes. "I get tired," she whispered, "of pretending, of being what people expect." Nathan hesitated, then asked, "What do you want to be?" Her answer was slow. "I don't know. Maybe just someone who's allowed to feel." He reached across the small table, took her hand gently in his. "You can feel here. With me." And that was when he told her. That he was falling in love with her. That he couldn't help it, even if he tried. That she was in his thoughts from the moment he woke up to the second he closed his eyes. He said it all with the soft voice of someone who wasn't trying to trap her, just offer her something she could accept or leave behind. Isla didn't speak for a long time. Then she said, "I don't deserve someone like you." Nathan shook his head. "Maybe you don't see yourself the way I do." She looked away, her jaw tight for a moment. But then she smiled faintly, and he took that smile as hope. The next evening, Julian pulled out all the stops. He had waited long enough, watched Isla slip away too many times. Now he was done waiting. He rented the ballroom at the Fairhill Hotel, filled it with white roses, chandeliers glowing above polished floors. A private string quartet played music no one else was around to hear. It was all for her. Isla arrived in a black gown, sleek and glittering like stars. She walked in slowly, looking around, saying nothing. Julian stepped toward her, heart thudding. "I've tried being patient," he said. "Tried to give you time, space. But Isla, I want more than that." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a velvet box. Inside was a ring that cost more than most houses in town. "Marry me," he said. "I'll give you everything. Anything. Just say yes." Isla stared at the ring, then looked up at him. Her expression didn't change. You don't even know who I am, she said quietly. I don't care, Julian replied. I know what I feel. That's enough. She took a deep breath, stepped back. No, she said. But I won't ask you to leave me alone either. Julian's eyes darkened. Why not? He asked, voice low. Because you like the attention? She gave him a calm look. Because I haven't decided what I want. Then she turned and walked away, the sound of her heels echoing in the empty hall. Julian didn't follow. He stood there, staring at the ring, his chest burning with something he didn't want to name, something between love and fury. Elijah was waiting when Isla got home. Not in the shadows this time, but leaning against her gate, arms crossed. She didn't seem surprised to see him. Couldn't sleep, she asked. Didn't try, he replied. He walked beside her up the path. She unlocked the door and let him in without asking why he was there. Inside, the air was quiet, heavy with unspoken thoughts. Elijah turned to her. You're playing with fire, he said. You know that, right? She raised an eyebrow. Is that what this is? A warning. He didn't answer. Instead, he pulled out a folder from his coat. Dropped it on her kitchen table. I've been looking into you, he said. Her body stiffened just slightly. You've used different names in other cities. There's no real record of you before 3 years ago. No family, no job history. But there are patterns. He pointed to the papers. 3 towns. 3 wealthy men. 1 disappeared. 1 lost everything. 1 ended up in a psychiatric hospital. Isla looked down at the folder, then up at him. You think that's me? She asked calmly. You think I caused all that? Elijah didn't blink. I think you attract chaos. And I think you know exactly what you're doing. For a moment, something cold passed over Isla's face. Her eyes hardened. Her lips pressed into a flat line. Then, just as quickly, she smiled. You don't know me, Elijah. No, he said. But I see you. That's the difference. She walked toward him, slow and graceful. And what do you see? She whispered. He didn't move. I see someone who hides behind beauty, who never gives too much because she's afraid someone might actually love her. I see someone who's been running for so long she forgot what peace feels like. For a second, she looked like she might cry. But then the shift happened. Her eyes went empty, cold. She stepped back, turned away, and said, You don't know what love is, Elijah. You only know how to chase ghosts. He left without another word. After that night, Isla began to change. It wasn't obvious at first, but those who paid attention saw it. She became sharper in her replies, colder in her eyes. She moved through town like a queen, not a mystery. People still admired her, but from farther away. Even Nathan noticed. He invited her for tea, but she canceled. He waited outside her gate, but she didn't come out. When she finally did call, her voice was distant. I just needed space, she told him. Everything feels heavy. Nathan tried to be understanding, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something had cracked, that the softness he had seen was slipping away. Julian grew more restless. He started drinking more, spending late nights at his office. He told his assistant to fire the investigator, then changed his mind the next day. He paced like a man waiting for a bomb to go off. When he drove past Isla's house, he saw Elijah's truck parked outside and nearly ran a red light. Elijah, meanwhile, was watching again. Not just Isla, but everyone. He started to believe that this wasn't just about love or lies. Something darker was at play. Something he couldn't quite name. One night, he broke into Isla's garden. Not to spy, but to look. He walked quietly along the stone path, past the rose bushes and fountains. Then he found it. A box, hidden beneath a loose brick. Inside were photos. Of Nathan. Of Julian. Of himself. next picture had marks. Circles, arrows, notes. He didn't understand all of them, but the message was clear. She had been watching them too. Not by accident. Not out of curiosity. On purpose. He put the box back and left. The next day, Nathan received a note at his clinic. It was written in neat handwriting. You don't know how close you are to losing everything. Stop now. No signature. Julian's car was keyed outside his office. Deep, deliberate scratches. No cameras had caught it. Elijah received no threats. Only a text. No number. Just 4 words. You were always right. The town didn't know what was coming. But something was shifting. The air felt different. The streets quieter. People began to look over their shoulders more often. And at the center of it all was Isla. Sometimes she stood by her window at night, watching the lights go out one by one across Fairhill. Her face expressionless, her hands still. In the mirror behind her, her reflection didn't smile. Whatever game she had started was no longer just a game. And love, if it had ever been real, was no longer the prize. The morning Julian didn't show up to his meeting, no one thought much of it. He was known for being unpredictable, canceling plans last minute if something more interesting came along. But by noon, his assistant was nervous. His phone went straight to voicemail. His driver hadn't heard from him. And the security guard at his estate said his car never left the garage. By evening, the whispers began. A few people called the police. Nothing official yet, just quiet questions. But by the next morning, news spread like wildfire. Julian Hale was missing. The town reacted with shock, but also a strange sense of expectation, like people had been waiting for something like this. He had too much charm, too much confidence. People like that often attracted danger. The search began quickly. Police scanned his home, his office, his phone records. His friends gave interviews. Cameras flashed, reporters gathered outside the estate. 2 days later, his body was found. The groundskeeper discovered him early in the morning, floating in the lake behind Julian's mansion. The surface was calm, the water quiet. But there he was, dressed in a black tuxedo, his eyes open, a single red rose placed on his chest. Didn't make sense. He wasn't bloated like someone who had been in the water long. His expression was peaceful, almost gentle. But he was dead. The news hit Fairhill like a storm. Everyone had a theory, a memory, a suspicion. And in every version of the story, Isla Monroe's name came up. The police brought her in that same afternoon. She arrived calmly, her long coat wrapped tightly around her, her hair pulled back. Her eyes looked tired, and when she sat in the interview room, she didn't ask for a lawyer. They asked her where she had been the night Julian disappeared. At home, she said. Alone. They asked her if she had seen him recently. She nodded. He asked me to dinner. I declined. They told her his body had been found in a tuxedo, holding a red rose. They watched her face carefully. She blinked slowly. Then the tears came. Not loud, not dramatic. Just quiet, slow tears sliding down her cheeks. I didn't kill him, she whispered. I didn't want him dead. They kept her for 3 hours. Asked the same questions in different ways. She gave the same answers. Calm. Sad. Steady. Then they let her go. Nathan was devastated. He stood by the lake that afternoon, staring at the water. A red police tape cut across the lawn, and a few people still lingered nearby. But he didn't notice them. All he could think about was the last time he saw Julian. The anger between them. The distance that had grown. He thought about Isla, too. About the way she had looked at him with tired eyes and told him she was overwhelmed. He believed her. He wanted to believe her. But a part of him had started to crack. Elijah, on the other hand, had never trusted her. Not fully. And now he was sure something wasn't right. He stood in Julian's office that night, surrounded by old books, untouched glasses of scotch, papers stacked neatly on the desk. Police had already gone through everything. But Elijah knew how to look where they wouldn't. He checked the cameras. Most were positioned around the property, but Julian had one in his study. A hidden one, placed in a carved wooden bookend. He watched the footage from the night Julian disappeared. Hours passed. Nothing. And then, at 11:42 p.m., she appeared. Isla. Wearing black. A long coat, gloves, heels that clicked softly on the marble floor. She stepped into the study, closed the door behind her. Her face was calm. Not sad. Not afraid. She walked to Julian's desk, looked at the papers. Touched the chair. Then she turned to the camera. No, not to the camera. To the wall where the camera was hidden. And she smiled. It was a small smile. Cold. Knowing. Then the screen went black. Elijah froze. He replayed the moment over and over. He tried to find the part where it made sense. But it didn't. Why would she come to Julian's house that night? Why didn't she mention it to the police? And that smile, what did it mean? He copied the footage onto a flash drive and slipped it into his jacket. He needed to talk to her. Nathan, meanwhile, found himself torn. He wanted to hold on to the woman who had cried in his arms. The one who said she didn't deserve love but still let him in. But Julian's death had shattered something in him. He saw Isla again 3 days later. She came to his clinic late, after hours. Her face was pale. Her eyes red. "I heard what people are saying," she said. He nodded, unsure how to respond. "Do you think I did it?" she asked. He looked at her, really looked. Her beauty was still breathtaking, but now it felt distant, like looking at a painting instead of a person. "I don't know," he said honestly. She didn't cry this time. She just nodded. "I didn't," she said. "But I knew something like this might happen." Julian was obsessive. He scared me sometimes. Nathan wanted to believe her. But something in her voice was off. Too smooth. Too calm. Till he wrapped his arms around her and she let him. For a moment, he felt like maybe he could save her. Elijah watched from across the street. He didn't approach. Not yet. That night, he went home and opened the box he'd found in her garden weeks ago. He spread out the photos again. Looked at the notes, the dates, the scribbled thoughts. He saw a pattern forming. Not just in what she did, but in how she did it. She always kept people close enough to need her, but far enough to fear her. And now one of them was dead. Elijah didn't sleep. He just stared at the photo of Isla in Julian's study, frozen on the screen. Her eyes watching the hidden lens. Her lips curled into that impossible smile. The next morning, the police released a statement. Julian Hale's death was being treated as suspicious, not an accident. Town reacted with gossip and fear. And Isla? She walked through the market in a white dress, her hair loose around her shoulders, her face calm. People stared. Some turned away. Some whispered behind her back. She didn't flinch. She smiled. And for the first time, Fairhill wondered if beauty could be dangerous. If love could be deadly. And if Isla Monroe was exactly what Elijah feared she was. Not a victim, but the storm. The house was silent, tucked away behind high hedges and iron gates, just like Isla herself, beautiful on the outside, hiding something behind walls no one could see through. Elijah parked 2 blocks down and walked through the trees, staying low. It was late. Cold. The wind scraped against his face as he moved, but he didn't feel it. He had made up his mind. He had watched her for weeks. Had studied the footage from Julian's study over and over again. That smile haunted him. It wasn't the smile of someone caught. It was the smile of someone who wanted to be seen. He picked the lock carefully. No alarms, no sounds. The house welcomed him in like it was expecting him. Inside, everything smelled like lavender and old paper. He moved slowly, room to room, not sure what he was looking for but certain he would know it when he saw it. Upstairs in the master bedroom, everything was neat. Her vanity was lined with perfume bottles and silver brushes. Her bed was perfectly made, without a wrinkle. But behind the closet door, past her rows of dresses and high heels, there was a small panel. Barely visible. He tapped it and heard the echo. Hollow. A hidden compartment. He pried it open and found a box. Wooden. Heavy. Locked. He broke the lock. Inside there was a leather-bound journal, dark red and worn from time. He opened it slowly. Pages were filled with handwriting, curved, elegant, feminine, but the words were jagged. Poems. Fragments. Sentences that made no sense at first glance but felt like they meant something awful. One read, *, he called me angel. He forgot angels can fall too, *. Another, *, I only wanted silence. But they kept talking. So I made them stop, *. Then came the photos. Dozens of them. Black and white prints, each showing one of the men she had been close to. Some were taken from a distance, behind trees, through windows. Others were up close, too close. Nathan smiling at a cafe. Julian walking into his office. Elijah standing outside his truck. On the back of each photo was a number. Julian's was marked with a 2. Nathan's had a 3. Elijah's? Just a question mark. He stared at that question mark for a long time. Then, tucked in the very back, he found a newspaper clipping. Old. Folded many times. It was from a town he didn't recognize. The headline was simple, "Local man drowns in bathtub, wife devastated." The man's name was Anthony Monroe. The photo was grainy, but the woman standing beside the coffin was unmistakable. Younger, with shorter hair. But the same face. Isla. Elijah read the article 3 times. Her husband had died under mysterious circumstances. Cause was ruled an accident. No foul play. No charges. The woman had disappeared soon after. He closed the box and stood still for a long time, the journal pressed against his chest. He left the house the way he came, quiet, fast, invisible. But everything had changed. This wasn't just about love anymore. Or jealousy. Or lies. This was something darker. He drove straight to Nathan's house. Nathan looked surprised when he opened the door. He had been reading, still in his work clothes. "Elijah?" he asked, confused. "It's late. I need to talk to you," Elijah said. "Now." Nathan let him in, sensing the urgency. Elijah dropped the journal on the table and opened it without explanation. He flipped through the photos, showed him the poems, pointed at the numbers. "Look at this," he said. "This is real. Julian was number 2. You're number 3. I don't know what I am. But this is not normal." Nathan stared at the pages but shook his head. "You broke into her house?" "Yes," Elijah said without apology. "I had to. You saw the footage. You know she was at Julian's that night. You know something is off." Nathan looked away, jaw tight. "She said she was afraid of Julian. That he was threatening her." "She lied," Elijah snapped. "Or twisted the truth. That's what she does. She's not who she says she is." Nathan stood up, fists clenched. "You don't know her." Elijah pointed at the diary. "I know enough." But Nathan wouldn't listen. "She's been through things you don't understand. Maybe that journal is her way of processing. Maybe it's just poetry. Maybe those numbers don't mean anything." Elijah shook his head, stunned. "You're not listening." "I am," Nathan said, softer now. "But I love her. And I believe her." Elijah stared at him, realizing then how deep Isla had gone into Nathan's heart. There was no pulling him out. Not now. Maybe not ever. And then Nathan said the one thing Elijah didn't expect. I'm going to ask her to marry me. Elijah froze. What? I already have the ring, Nathan said. I was going to wait, but after everything that's happened, I need her to know I'm not afraid. That I trust her. Elijah couldn't believe what he was hearing. You're making a mistake. Nathan looked at him, eyes full of something close to pity. Or maybe I'm saving her. Elijah left without another word. That night, Nathan went to Isla's house. She opened the door in a silk robe, surprised to see him but smiling. He walked in without hesitation, took her hands in his and dropped to one knee. Her eyes widened. I love you, he said. I don't care about the past. I don't care what people say. I want to be with you. Forever. He pulled out the ring and held it up to her. Isla didn't speak at first. Her face was unreadable. Then she said softly, Are you sure? Yes, he whispered. She stared at him and something flickered in her eyes, something dark, uncertain. But then it was gone. She nodded. Okay, she said. Yes. He slid the ring onto her finger. She leaned down and kissed him. Side, Elijah watched from his car. His fists clenched around the steering wheel. He had warned him. He had shown him the truth. But Nathan was already lost. And Isla? She had won again. But Elijah wasn't giving up. Not yet. Not until he knew what her endgame was. Not until he found out what that question mark next to his name really meant. The morning of the wedding began like a dream. Soft light spilled through the windows of the estate where Nathan had chosen to host the ceremony. The garden had been transformed into a fairy tale. White roses draped over arches. Chairs arranged in perfect lines. Music rehearsed, photographers ready. The sun touched everything with gold. Guests began arriving in quiet excitement, whispering about the beauty of the place, about how lucky Nathan was, about how Isla had surprised them all. She had become something of a mystery in the town, a beauty wrapped in enigma, now stepping into a new chapter. Everyone wondered what kind of bride she would be. No one doubted she would be stunning. But as the hour approached, things began to fray at the edges. Nathan hadn't come down from his room. The groomsman knocked, then knocked again. No answer. Finally, the manager of the estate used a master key. The door opened slowly. Nathan was on the floor beside the bed. First, they thought he was dead. His skin looked pale and his body limp. But when one of the men pressed fingers to his neck, they found a pulse. Weak but there. Someone shouted. Someone else called 911. The room turned into chaos. Paramedics arrived quickly and wheeled Nathan away. The guests, confused and worried, whispered among themselves. Some were told the ceremony was postponed. Others left quietly, unsure what had happened. But one thing became clear when the officiant was asked what to do. Isla had never shown up. Not a message. Not a call. No one had seen her since the night before. Elijah found out the news not through the wedding itself, but from a friend on the force who texted him with one word: missing. He didn't go to the hospital. He went straight to Isla's house. It was empty. Clean. Like she had never lived there at all. Then he remembered something Nathan had once mentioned in passing weeks ago, how Isla had spoken of a cabin up in the woods. A place where she sometimes went to be alone. No cell signal. No neighbors. Elijah drove fast. The road twisted and narrowed, trees closing in from both sides. The sky darkened with clouds. He didn't care. When he reached the cabin, the door was open. He stepped inside slowly. She was there. Sitting by the fireplace, legs folded under her, staring at the flames. She didn't look surprised to see him. I wondered if it would be you, she said softly. Elijah didn't move. Nathan's alive, he said. She smiled faintly. I didn't want to kill him. You drugged him, Elijah said. On his wedding day. She didn't deny it. I needed him to sleep through it. He would have come looking for me. He stepped closer. Why? Why run now? Why not just leave before? She looked up at him then, and in that moment she seemed both fragile and sharp, like glass that could shatter or cut. Because part of me wanted it to be real, she said. I wanted to believe I could stay. Then why didn't you? He asked. She laughed, bitter and low. Because they never saw me, Elijah. None of them did. They saw beauty, mystery, perfection. They didn't want me, they wanted a dream. And when a dream starts to feel real, people try to own it. He stared at her, anger boiling under his skin. You killed Julian. She didn't answer right away. The fire cracked beside her. I gave him a chance, she said finally. He tried to control me, to trap me. He said if I left, he'd destroy me. I didn't plan it. But once it started, it felt quiet. Elijah felt his breath catch. What about your husband? He asked. Another long pause. He fell, she said. He drank too much. Slipped in the bath. That's what the papers say. And maybe it's true. Or maybe I held him under. I honestly don't know anymore. You're sick, he said, voice low. She looked at him then with something like pity. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just tired of pretending to be something for everyone else. You think you know me. You think you've figured me out. But you don't even know who you are, Elijah. You've been following shadows your whole life. I know you marked me with a question mark, he said. I saw it. She smiled again. You weren't part of the plan. I couldn't decide what to do with you. You're the only one who looked at me like I was dangerous and worth saving. He didn't know what to say to that. She stood up slowly. The fire behind her cast her shadow across the wall like wings. You should go now, she said. Before it's too late. He didn't move. She stepped closer. I'm not coming back. Tell them whatever you want. Tell me the truth, he said. She leaned in close, and for a moment he thought she might kiss him. Her breath was warm. Her eyes tired. The truth, she whispered. I never meant to hurt them. I just wanted to be free. Then behind her he noticed smoke. Not from the fireplace. From the back room. He turned just as flames shot up the curtains. What did you do? He shouted. I gave myself a clean ending, she said calmly. Elijah grabbed her arm. We need to get out. Now. But she pulled away. I don't want to run anymore. The flames spread fast. The walls groaned. The heat built quickly. Elijah tried to drag her, but she pushed him back hard. Go, she screamed. Before you burn too. He looked into her eyes one last time and saw something there. Sadness, maybe. Regret. But not fear. He ran. Cabin collapsed behind him in a roar of flames and smoke. He stumbled through the woods, coughing, his clothes singed, his hands burned. He didn't stop running until he saw the road again. Until he saw the stars. He collapsed on the ground, heart pounding, breath shaking. Behind him, the cabin glowed in the night like a dying sun. She was gone. Maybe dead. Or maybe she had planned even this. He didn't know. He lay there until morning. And when he finally got up, he knew everything had changed. Nathan would live. But the wedding would never happen. And Isla Monroe? She had vanished into fire and memory. Question mark beside Elijah's name still lingered. But now, maybe it had become something else. Not a threat. A warning. The smoke had long faded when the official search ended. A week after the fire, the local authorities ruled the cabin incident as accidental. Elijah told them everything, what Isla said, what he had found in her house, what she had confessed before the flames swallowed her whole. They asked questions, took statements, and searched the ruins. No remains were found. The fire had burned too hot too fast, they said. Wisla had stayed inside, she was gone now, nothing but ash. But without a body there was no certainty. Just a haunting absence. Nathan recovered slowly. The drugs had taken a toll on his system, but he would live. He never spoke much about Isla afterward. When people asked, he only said she was the most beautiful mystery he'd ever known, and mysteries like that weren't meant to stay. His heart, once open and full of dreams, now beat quietly. He continued his work, helped people, and never tried to find love again. Elijah stayed in town long enough to close loose ends. He helped clear Nathan's name. He testified at the informal inquest about Julian's death. But the story grew blurry. Julian's past, the secrets he kept, the controlling behavior, all of it came out after his death. In the end, no charges were filed. No real justice. Just questions. Just silence. People in town slowly returned to their routines. The whispers faded. Isla Monroe became a legend. A woman no one could forget and no one could truly know. But Elijah couldn't forget. He tried. He left the town quietly without telling many people, packed a bag, sold the house, and disappeared from the place that had tried to pull him under. He traveled for a while, sometimes driving, sometimes walking, never settling. He told himself it was over. She was gone. He had survived. But in the quiet moments, in the shadows of dreams, he still saw her. Her eyes watching him. Her voice in the wind. Time passed. The years moved without mercy. The world kept spinning. Elijah found himself in places he never thought he'd see, mountains, deserts, coasts, cities where no one knew his name. He grew older. Wiser, maybe. But not free. Then, one spring, he found himself in Venice. He hadn't meant to come. It just happened. A ferry, a train, a moment of restlessness. He walked the narrow streets, watched the water ripple in the canals, listened to the songs of gondoliers drifting through air as old as the city itself. One morning, while having coffee at a quiet cafe by the water, something caught his eye. A woman. She stepped out of a bookstore across the plaza. Her hair was longer now, darker. She wore sunglasses and a pale scarf, but her face, the shape of her mouth, the curve of her chin, the way she walked, it all screamed Isla. Elijah's breath caught in his throat. He didn't move. She didn't see him. Or if she did, she didn't let it show. She walked with purpose, turned the corner, and disappeared into the crowd. Just like that. He didn't chase her. He sat there for a long time, staring at where she had vanished. Maybe it was a trick of the mind. Maybe his memory had painted her onto some stranger's face. Or maybe, not so impossible, she had lived. She had planned it all. She had always been one step ahead. That night, when he returned to the quiet room he was renting, he found an envelope waiting for him. No return address. No stamp. Just his name, handwritten in neat, looping letters. Inside was a postcard. A photo of a red rose sharp against a dark background. There was no message. No signature. But Elijah knew. He sat on the bed, the card in his hand, and felt everything he had tried to bury rise again. He had survived her. But survival was not the same as freedom. She still lived in the corners of his mind, in the hesitation before trust, in the eyes of every stranger he could not quite believe. She was the ghost that walked beside him, unseen, untouched, but never truly gone. He put the postcard in his coat pocket and looked out the window. Venice shimmered under the moonlight. The water whispered below. He whispered to no one, "You're still out there, aren't you?" There was no answer. Just the night. Just the memory. Every man had loved her. Only one had survived her. But he never truly escaped.